Hello, everybody, and welcome to A Soulful Revolution, a podcast at the intersection of spiritual transformation and social change. I'm your host, Lauren Grubaugh Thomas, a priest, writer, spouse, and twin mama living in Colorado on Arapaho and Cheyenne homelands. Every episode, I feature a conversation with a soulful revolutionary, someone whose commitment to justice is nourished by their spiritual beliefs, practices, and values. Today, my guest is Pete Nunnally. Father Pete is an Episcopal priest planting a carbon-neutral church called Water and Wilderness Church. He was a middle school teacher before moving to New Orleans to work in Katrina recovery. He's passionate about being a fisherman and writer, and he has a forthcoming book, Catching Hope, The Hidden Spiritual Wisdom of Fishing, due out next year. Pete, it's a joy to have you on the show today. Thanks for being here.
Hey, my friend. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
For sure. I always open with a question. What does it mean to you to live at this intersection, this crossroads of spiritual transformation and social change?
It's interesting. I heard someone just the other day who's gone to church for a long time say, what is this phrase, spiritual transformation? I don't know what that is. And I thought, wow, like you've been coming to church for 25 years. Like I don't know, the thing that we're trying to do. So what does it mean to me? And what does it mean to live in this time? This is a gut check for whether we're going to stay at the foot of the cross or whether we're going to leave. And it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Not everybody has the same gifts. But, for those of us that have a voice, it is to pick up the microphone that the church put down back in the 60s and start using it again, and to not only proclaim what Jesus is about, but to say what isn't. To be a soulful revolutionary, to me, is to recover what has been lost. We're not making up anything new. We're just drawing people back to, hey, this is what it means to follow Jesus. We all are terrible at it, but we're trying, and we have the same destination. Unfortunately, there are some people in the world today that call themselves Christians that do not have that destination. They are not Christian. They are not Christian. And it's time for us to start saying that and to claim it's not just a theological or soteriological difference. It is, we make choices that impact our relationship with God, our relationship with one another, and the vulnerable among us. So I think the bell is ringing. The bell is tolling for us now in this moment. Will we take up our cross and follow Jesus to the margins and to the halls of power, to firmly but gently speak truth, as Bishop Buddy did so eloquently a few days ago?
I want to refer back to a phrase that you used about staying at the foot of the cross, which for our listeners who are Christian, that term may invoke really different meanings, but depending on like what stream of Christianity they have been raised in or come into. And then for our listeners for whom the Christian tradition is not their own, that phrase also probably connotes a lot of different meanings.
Yeah.
So, and I'd say like you're alluding to what I typically refer to as Christofascism, the religious right. Yeah. And so I'm curious for you what that phrase means and how you would differentiate that from its use by folks who weaponize the cross.
They don't understand what happened. And just to be very clear, like this is our tradition, this is our understanding. If I grew up in India, I would be like Hindu. So very universalist in a sense of how God reveals God's self to us. But this whole thing is not about getting to heaven. Like that's not what it's about. It just isn't. It never has been. It never will be. But it is about how to live well with one another now. When we say eternal life, it's not tuck everlasting. It's like a magic
That's a
potion.
terrifying book. That book freaked me out when I was young.
Really?
Like the idea of like, you'll never die.
I
You'll
mean,
be
yeah,
stuck here.
I kind of liked it, but it was crazy.
It's very
Yeah,
romanticized.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Um, like if you're gonna live forever, like being a vampire would be kind of cool, I guess. But like some special powers. But it's not that. Like that's not what eternal life is. And it's actually very clearly stated in the Gospel of John what eternal life is. But um, and so that's not it. And then so what is it? I've been writing more and more about like what's the point of Jesus? Like if you come to church and your experience of church is to feel good, okay, that's awesome. It's definitely a part of it. Um, but as William Temple said, the church is the only institution. And I could modify this to say houses of worship are the only institutions where that exist for the sake of their non-members. And to be at the foot of the cross um, and not to leave is to witness the suffering of the world and then stay there and try to do something about it rather than running away. And it's to risk some of your reputation. Some of my friends are afraid to speak out because they will upset some of their parishioners. And so what we end up doing is trying to find the 1 millimeter of space to thread the needle between being authentic to the gospel and not diluting it for the sake of not unity, but just peacekeeping. Most people can't really do that. So we end up not actually saying the quiet part out loud, which is that if you are still supporting the president in this way, like blindly, there's some economic arguments, there's some other arguments. Democrats don't see the good stuff; we only see the bad stuff. Republicans don't see any of the bad stuff; they only see the good stuff. But like blind allegiance to a person is a problem, and to say the question that most of us ask in private is how can you profess to follow Jesus but vote for this, or how can you profess to follow Jesus and not be upset by this, right? So you can vote for it and think like, I didn't think it would be this bad, or I didn't really know what was going on. Like that's totally legit, but now you do. And to be upset that the bishop asked for mercy and unity, and to call that an attack is madness. But people are afraid to say that because it will hurt some people's feelings and they will leave. But
yeah, I've heard it referred to as enmeshment, political enmeshment, where identity is lost in a person. And then it's so difficult to disentangle the actions of that person from one's own existence. Like it feels like a personal attack.
yeah.
When there's such a deep a sense of another term for it that's often used in like civil resistance is psychological identification with the authoritarian, that I don't know, even when it's so obvious on a like fact-based level, on an intellectual level, that like we're never going to be billionaires. Like all the people listening to this conversation, none of us are ever going to be billionaires. It just ain't going to happen. But there's something about the way in which an authoritarian wields their power and convinces people that like, no, you can be like me. You should identify yourself with me. Where folks think that they're more likely to become a billionaire and they identify themselves with that and work for that world where billionaires can exist, versus seeing themselves as vulnerable to the exploitation of billionaires, which all of us are. Like we're most, I think it's the statistic is something like 88% of Americans are one paycheck away from not being able to pay their rent. So it's just this mythology that's grown up around this particular personage of Trump.
Totally.
And I hear you describing it. This is not the word you've used, but I hear it implied, and I'm curious to hear more about this. It feels like a deification, like a God making.
Yeah, definitely apotheosis for sure.
Say more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's this grand worshiping, this elevation, and all that. And I mean, like It's superhero stuff.
Yeah.
Jesus is also not a superhero, right? Like, and
Although when I was an evangelical child, we had a song that we sang, Jesus is my superhero.
I know.
It's such crappy theology. It's such destructive theology.
Yeah,
And it really like lets us off the hook
it
from
does.
having to do anything about the state of the world or the flourishing of our neighbor.
Yeah. But can I say something? Like,
Yeah.
I took a risk in a sermon on Sunday. It was kind of sharp. And one of the lines, which is in my Substack, Father Pete, the Wilderness Priest. Um, but I said, if the gospel offends our politics or our way of life, the problem isn't the gospel, and it's doing its job. And then I pivoted to talk about like I'm also haunted by the gap between how I want to live my life, as I feel like Jesus is calling me to, and how I actually live it. Like this, everybody's got mirrors in their house. An interesting thing happened was that some, folks were upset, and I love them. I don't understand them, but I love them, in this moment. But other people started to get curious, and they were thinking like, okay, like it's a little uncomfortable what you're saying, but we think you're right, that mercy and unity and justice are important. And like, we just don't know what to do. So like, they were like, how come you didn't tell us what to do? And I said, gosh, guys, like, I'm not holding, like, you're doing exactly what I want you to do, which is to
Yeah.
wonder, what should we do?
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and
To be
not
free to ask
even,
questions.
yeah. And not even be like, we don't, they were like, we don't know what you want us to do. And I said,
Ooh, that's telling, isn't it?
right. And
It's revealing.
I said, yeah, that's a really great starting point. But
Yes.
it's not, the question isn't what Father Pete wants us to do. The question
Right.
is, what does Jesus want us to do? But we never would have gotten there if we hadn't, if I hadn't have taken a risk, if they hadn't have been risky and be open and say like, I don't know about all this, but like, it's, it's work. And it is work, and it's really hard for people. I've I wrote an essay lambasting affirmative action when I was 19 and a freshman in college, which is because I just didn't think it was fair. And I was dumb and totally wrong, but like everybody has a right to start somewhere. I think if a lot of us are honest, we're not right about everything. And we've even held views very firmly that were wrong.
Yeah.
Or that evolved. The right thing to do changes. The right thing to do in the 80s isn't the right thing to do now.
Yeah.
So we understand more.
And when I hear you talking about curiosity and spaces where people can grow, that feels like spiritual transformation to me. And we shoot ourselves in the foot. Let me use a not gun metaphor. We don't help ourselves on the left when we cancel people for not knowing. when folks who say things that are out of a place of ignorance, of not knowing, and we attack people, which there's just this pile-on effect online. And it causes folks to shut down and not feel like it's safe to be curious or to grow or to change or to evolve. And one of the things that came up for me over this last week since Bishop Buddy's sermon was having folks within the Palestine movement space in which I've been involved saying, but Lauren, because I am an Episcopal priest, people were asking me, Palestinian friends and allies were asking me, but what has she said about Gaza? And the truth is that early on October 10th, Bishop Buddy put out a statement that was really Zionist. And in March, she put out a statement where she was asking for mercy for Gazans. Was it a perfect statement? No. Did it still have a lot of Hasbara talking points, Zionist talking points? Yes. And she demonstrated growth. She demonstrated change. She demonstrated a will to make amends and practice humility. And I have great faith in Bishop Marianne Buddy's capacity to change and to grow and to acknowledge that she's been wrong and that she has amends to make, or reparation to make for that. So that is what gives me hope, is when folks are, when we, not just individuals, but as communities, we can hold space for that kind of human development and consciousness and spirit, and intellect. But those are really rare spaces. And especially when the culture that we're living in is so fear-based. And so that's leading me to my next question for you, which is about the space that you are creating of Water and Wilderness Church. What are the values that are guiding you in leading this community in as you seek to be a carbon neutral church, which I'm super curious to hear more about what that means.
Yeah. So you asked like 4 questions. And you're asking it
Always.
to like an ADHD person. Did you
Bing,
know
bing,
this?
bing.
Yeah. Like it's really fun. Like as an adult, you're like, wait, I'm absolutely, and I have an official ADHD diagnosis. Like everything makes sense. Like I'm pretty smart. But my GPA was crap because like I didn't really want to study. I couldn't do it for that
Right.
long. um, but anyway, so spiritual transformation, it absolutely has to do with being curious. Like you can't, every 5 years when we write down what we believe about God, it better change. Like
Mm.
it better expand. And honestly, like part of what I love about Water and Wilderness Church is so expansive, and we're not limited
Mm.
by the words of the Book of Common Prayer. And the traditional liturgy is beautiful, but it also can shrink God down to the size of our pocket. Our
Mm.
conservative brothers and sisters, especially in the evangelical non-denom churches, they make God even smaller, into a little, put him a little in your pocket, and that's where God is. But without curiosity, and without openness and being willing to be wrong, um,
Mm.
we're never going to grow. And so that's a deep piece of what it means to be human, and to yearn for God. I mean, you can't yearn for God if you think you know everything about it, and you end up being an asshole. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you just
Mm-hmm.
do. And it was just so great about getting older because you just end up realizing like, God, I don't really know shit. So given that fact, maybe the best thing I can do is love people that I'm around and show up into spaces that need more love and more mercy, more justice, more forgiveness, and show up in those spaces. And the only reason that I got to where I am and my understanding about racial justice, is because there were people along the way in my path who put their arm around me, and they understood like I was a good guy. I was trying. I was definitely saying the wrong things, but I never got shouted down.
Mm.
And I was fortunate to be around grown-ups. So not 25-year-olds who are pissed off, and I get why they're pissed off, but grown-ups to put their arm around me and to still love me and to show me, through word and deed, uh, how I can grow in that way. Does that make sense? Like, um, all of the spiritual transformation is relational.
Mm.
And so that goes to the growing in our understandings of different people. Like I'm a straight white guy. We should have said that at the beginning. Uh,
I wish I was thinking about this before the episode, and you're my first.
right. That was awesome. I mean, listen, I know, like, I'll probably get shit for this, right? But like, straight white guys, I was in the minority in seminary, right? It's
Uh-huh.
about time, I get all that stuff, but that's great. I can't believe it. Well, I was born without a right ear, so
Right.
like I have hearing loss, and um, so I'm not normal. But wow, I'm your first straight white guy. Well done, by the way. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Like about 20 guests in. So
I hope that my ontology is different than the ontology of a traditional American straight
Mm.
white guy. And but we all, yeah, and I think most of us in this world feel like we're foreigners. So your question was about Water and Wilderness Church, um, and so I've always felt. I mean, I again, so straight white guy. A lot is given to me in certain ways. I'm 6'3", and I look like I should be in charge. Although, I mean, with this freaking curly hair, I look like a clown. But um, understanding all that, I never felt like I fit in seminary because I didn't drink all that Kool-Aid. Like I realized that the world is on fire, that no one believes in God anymore.
Yeah.
And they were trying to form me as though when we walk out there, everybody has the language of Jesus. Everybody goes to church. And your biggest problems are going to be like small little theological issues. And it's really important to know about, I don't want to throw Bart under the bus. I like Bart some, but but that's not reality.
Yeah.
And reality is like people are their spouses, their parents, their children. They are employees and employers, and it's a hard world to live in, and especially hard if you are queer, especially hard if you're trans, especially hard if you are black, and capital B black. And the more we understand about the history of, and not just black, but of Hispanic descent and Asian descent and all of the rest, that the more we understand about white supremacy, I mean, there's a lot to learn. I'm sympathetic to. I don't know what Bishop Buddy said, but it's hard to find the right words for every single situation. But so the traditional church, I think, represents patriarchy and hegemony and a sexist way of being. There are a lot of liberal churches out there that are doing incredible work, but by and large, we have theological problems in our liturgy in terms of sacrificial atonement, which is still in there, and we all just kind of like do it, and we're like,
Yeah.
yeah, like don't. I mean, like sacrifice for our sins, and Jesus died for you. But like that's not really what it means. And I'm like, well, fucking stop saying it, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it
Language
is.
matters.
Language matters. And we've got some really cool prayers, and the EOW is really awesome. But what I love about Water and Wilderness Church is we're taking outside of the church walls, and we're putting, like, we have forgotten. I fell backwards into this, but my passion is around the earth and earth care, and it didn't always used to be that. But how is it that we can use our earth like it's a resource and like not like it's a living thing? Like, how is it that we can just appreciate the beauty of it, but also cut everything down and drill down and extract? Like, you are a thing for our use, right? Like, what if we looked at the earth as a thou instead of an it, to use Martin Buber's language, like as a subject rather than an object? That we are not stewards of creation. We are not people that like creation care. We are members of the community of creation. I forget who said that. It wasn't me. But I will say this, and these are my words: the body of Christ includes the natural world. It is not just humans. And if we've believed that, what an amazing thing that our brothers and sisters, are the trees and the chipmunks and the fish and the wind and the fire and earth, that the earth really is a living thing. And that God, it is our first testament. It is, the Old Testament is not the first testament of God. Nature is the first testament of God. And in Water and Wilderness Church, one of our taglines is, nature is God's heartbeat.
Oh,
Isn't that
I
nice?
love that.
We have T-shirts for $25 and $6 shipping. Nature has got its
we'll
heartbeat on
put
the
we'll
back.
put we'll put the link in the show notes.
um, and that the earth is calling us home. Here's one of the great things about the earth is it does not choose between different kinds of people.
Mm.
Mother Earth is here for all of us and with all of us. And so you're moving out of a structure of church that for many people feels harmful. It reminds them of trauma, or it just reminds them of the people that don't really give a shit about them in different ways. Taking the traditions of our church, however, and translating them and bringing them outside of the church walls and translating them into experiences of worship that are meaningful and relevant to people today. That's what we're doing. And so we're
Mm.
saying to people, all of this is worship. The natural world itself is worship and it is living. And so when we take the beauty of what we have in the Episcopal tradition and the Christian tradition, and these are things like praying, these are things like being still and listening for God. These are things like singing. We sing a lot.
Mm.
And looking at each other's faces. Somebody said once, like, when I go to
Oh.
regular church, I just see the back of people's heads and then I go home. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds terrible. But in Water and Wilderness Church, when we're circled up, you see people's faces. And like,
Mm.
wow. I mean, just that distinction between the back of someone's head and then their
Yeah.
face. And we open
Yeah.
every worship by by introducing ourselves and saying something that we're grateful for. And the coolest
Mm.
thing is that it wasn't my idea. It was somebody that had been coming for about 6 months. And she was like, Father Pete, there's always a different group of us here. And I can't remember
Mm.
everybody's name. What if we just introduced ourselves and said one thing we're grateful for? And like,
Oh, that's lovely.
it's so lovely and it's revolutionary because you would never in a traditional setting in most religions, you wouldn't be able to go up to the priest and say, I have some thoughts about how you should run the church service today. Like
Mm.
it would be like, no.
Yeah.
But this is a different context, and so what we're cultivating is a sense of belonging without ownership or without
Yeah.
possession. Belonging without
Yeah.
possession, um, and it levels the playing field in a number of different ways. One, it's without all of that traumatic baggage. And I wrote my senior thesis on theological trauma. Like, if you were hurt by the church, I get you. And that's part of why I want to do this out here, which is
Mm.
something that is more
Outside the
ancient than the
doors,
church.
out in the wild.
Outside. Yes.
Yeah.
And speaking of the wild, like, it's uncontrollable. So
Mm.
how often do we try to script our religious experience? Um, and that is a way of diminishing God.
Mm.
But when we go out into the wild, you don't know whether a beaver is going to show up, which has happened, which is amazing,
Mm.
or fish, or fishermen, or great blue herons like flying overhead, migratory birds chattering in the trees, and uh, to see the arc of the rhythms in the year in
Mm.
one place, and to become known by the trees and to know
Mm.
them. And at the same time, like, every time you come to the river's edge, it's a different river. It's the same place, it's different water, it's a different river. So you have this vitality that is unreal, and
Mm.
we don't live on top of that. We live in that. There's some of that is in us, um, and these are things that are universal. Um, they're so. Care for the earth is a universal care, and the earth cares for us. Deborah Rienstra wrote a great book called Refugee of Faith, and highly recommend to everybody. And in it, she talks about the trees caring for us. We always
Mm.
think that, like, we need to take care of nature, which we do. But she's like, what if we just imagine that they were trying to take care of us?
Yeah.
Like, how would we relate to the world we knew that it was trying to help us, that it was praying for us.
I'm really struck by the language of reciprocity and mutuality. And wow, the tree's praying for us, that. And I've been reflecting on the grief of the earth, especially in relation to the fires in Los Angeles County and to the hurricane that blew through Appalachia and just caused so much destruction and loss of life, and the ways in which this world is expressing pain and wounding and perhaps in some ways like trying to heal from that. I don't want to speak on her behalf, but it feels like there is this there are these deep expressions of grief and of just longing perhaps for these relationships to be restored in the natural world amongst all of us. And it's as though creation is trying to get our attention. And so what I hear and what you're describing is a deep listening.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really curious about what it means to you to listen.
You're so good. I love you so much. I have been told to listen a lot. I haven't been asked what it means to listen. I agree with you, Lauren, that the earth is responding to the world, our reactions, our extraction, and what we've done to it. When I think of the earth as the body of Christ, and I remember that, and then for the non-Christian people, like I affirm and validate your faith. This is mine. Jesus willingly was crucified, and so we say that that God is vulnerable, and the earth is vulnerable. Like a tree will not prevent you from cutting it down. It will let you do it. And yet, if you cut all the trees down in a field, those trees will have dropped seeds, and those seeds will grow into trees, and the earth will heal itself. It takes a long time, and things look different, and the environments look different. I have been struck lately by the vulnerability of creation and how that mimics the vulnerability of God, even in our own lives. God will not stop us from making decisions. The world in our life responds to a place we get to. Listening. I was meditating today in the field during Water and Wilderness Church, and the word that came to me is stillness. That is a very powerful word for someone who is a 7 on the Enneagram and bounces around. But to listen has to be still. And can I tell you a story real quick?
Please.
So when I was in New Orleans, I went out to a retreat center outside of the city, and it was hot as hell. And I was walking around this pond. And I mean, it was so hot that the pond was totally motionless. Like even the pond didn't want to move. And then I sat down next to it, and something caught my eye, and I looked up, and I realized that the pond was moving, and that the lily pads were slowly moving. That there was a current to this pond, and I realized that because I was in motion, it looked like the pond was stationary. But once I became still, and in this case, listening with my eyes, then I could see what is actually happening around me, and that the pond was moving. So,
Mm.
so a broader reality is open to us when we're still, and when we listen.
Mm.
So I think to be open and still and look is part of what it means to listen. And
Mm.
in that way, it has to be with other people that don't always agree with us.
Mm.
Like it just does. Um, and in this time, I think it's also um, it's time for the church to, in the same manner as Bishop Buddy in her tone and comportment and gentleness but firmness, um, stand up for love, justice, mercy, and forgiveness.
I love how you tie that together, the stillness and then the way that we can be with others out of that place of awareness and presence and attention. Um, I imagine that's a lot of what you must be writing about in your book. And I want to give you a chance to share more about the book that you've written. I want to make sure I get the title right. Catching Hope, the Hidden Spiritual Wisdom of Fishing. I love the hiddenness of it. I'm curious about that.
Well, it is.
Yeah, tell us
Yeah,
more.
sure. Can we, like, yeah,
Do you need a
would
pause?
rather talk about Water and Wilderness Church a little bit more,
Yeah,
if that's
please.
possible. But let me tell you about the book real
Mm-hmm.
quick. It's not completely done, but the Broadleaf Books is the publisher, and I'm really excited. It's going to come out spring next year, and
Mm.
I fell in love with fishing again during COVID. My dad and I were getting fat and drinking too much and eating too much on the couch one night in winter of 2020. And he was like, "We got to go fishing a lot this year. We're going to fish our asses
Mm.
off." Because we used to do that when I was little.
Mm. Huh.
And to revisit fishing as an ordained person, somebody who's gone to seminary for 3 years, I looked at everything differently. I was like, "Oh my God, like this whole thing is a spiritual practice." And in that to go fishing is an extended act of hope, um,
Mm.
because you're in small meaning, like silly ways, in larger ways, you do hope that you're going to catch something, right? um, you wouldn't go out there if you didn't kind of hope you were going to catch something. And everything needs to go just right in order to catch a fish. You don't know where the fuck they are. Like they're
Right.
under the surface. They are hidden, right? And so much of the true wisdom of life is hidden under the surface. So I started to realize that this whole thing is an act of hope, and that every cast that you throw your lure out there, you're hoping. And it might not be a big hope, it might be really teeny, but it's a hope. And I don't know about you, but I'm somebody that struggles with some mental health stuff, depression and anxiety and things like that. And so sometimes for me to just know that I'm hoping by going fishing,
Mm.
is good.
Mm.
And we don't catch anything, and I go home and I said, for an hour and a half, I hoped a little bit, and
Wow.
and maybe you catch a fish, and that's even better. But the
Hmm.
other thing is you can't catch a fish on your couch. Like you have to go out to the edge of the water. And
Mm.
in an area, in an age when we're so isolated and we're so disconnected from the land, you have to go to the edge of the water to fish.
Hmm.
And, as spiritual people, we're water people. Like our ancient stories are about water. And um, the, the sound of water lapping the bank is the oldest sound in the universe. It's the
Hmm.
breath of the cosmos.
Hmm.
Um, so to put ourselves at the edge of the water is to put ourselves at the edge of God's fingertips
Hmm.
and cast out and say, I hope and I
Hmm.
wonder what's there.
Hmm.
And then there's all kinds of, I could just go on and on and on. But the thing is that God is doing that with us. So,
Hmm.
how is God fishing for us? And what is God using for bait. Because it's different for you than it is for me, you know. But in every case, God is continuing to come after us.
Yeah.
So those are
What a
just a
great question.
little snippets there.
Yeah.
But yeah, Water and Wilderness Church, the way that you can be a part of it. Here's one of the revolutionary things about it. Normally, churches are geographic. You know, this is my church. This is where I go. When we do a book study, it's, you know, St. Swithin's book study. Nobody else is invited. Water and Wilderness Church is movement. You're familiar with this, right? Um, it's a watershed community, and so the central hub is in DC, weekly worshiping community. You know, in a few months, we got a foothold, a tributary in Delaware. We're going to have tributaries hopefully in Maryland and in Virginia. That will be like monthly, right? But but you can be a part of this even if you're in Arizona. You can be a part of the book study where we study. We're doing Stephen Charleston's book right now. We survived the apocalypse, or we survived the end of the world. Do you know that book?
I don't know the book. For those who are listening, Stephen Charleston is the retired bishop of Alaska, right?
Yeah.
Native American bishop, Episcopal bishop. Yeah, who's just got an incredible voice.
He's awesome.
But that book sounds phenomenal.
It's so good.
Yeah.
The subtitle is
Wow.
Lessons from Native America on Apocalypse and Hope.
Wow.
And you can all be a part of this. You know, it's Zoom, and we cultivate community, and we've got retreats. Next retreat is coming up. It's on the Chincoteague Bay Field Station, and they're going to take us out, and we're going to get our hands dirty and our feet wet and our soul filled, like learning about, you know, the organisms that live in the water and how the sun and the moon interact to affect the tides, and what maritime forests are like, and, you know, the different adaptations of the ecology. And then we think about, what are the different adaptations that I need to make in this world right now? Do I need to make a physical adaptation or a physiological adaptation? So, you know, the next one there is May 17 to 2021. But we've also got, just like you, we've got Substacks, and I make these little videos on Instagram. It's just a way to reach people who maybe just a little bit of church. You know, maybe you can't go, maybe you're uncomfortable with it, but here's how you see God in nature. Here's how you see church in the natural world. And all of these things together are part of the ecosystem of Water and Wilderness Church. Yeah.
Oh, what a lovely way to frame it and invite people in.
Yeah. How am I doing as your first straight white guy guest? Can I apologize? Like, I'm sorry,
this has
everybody.
Been so lovely. No, Pete, this has been so lovely. There's no apology needed. No, what I so appreciate about you is the humility and the embodiment with which you walk through the world, and the courage with which you walk through the world. But it's a courage that's really, that's a humble courage. You know, you're I've never experienced you as somebody with a lot of like bravado, or trying to take up a lot of space. And I think that's why you're sort of right at home in this panoply of soulful revolutionaries, is as a person who is living this courageous life, for the sake of integrity, for the sake of faithfulness, for the sake of really being able to show up in the world as a full person.
Yeah, for the sake of the people that don't have what most of us have in America. You know, for the sake of, and I preached this sermon on Sunday where I was pretty sharp, and an older gay man came to the altar rail, and he mouthed the words, "Thank you." And I gave communion to the next 5 people with tears running down my cheeks, because somebody should be saying this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And the church should be saying things like this all the time. People who are terrified that our government's going to come after them for who they are and how God made them. And it is an honor to stand with the courageous people that are afraid and still living living lives of love and hope in this world.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the ministry that you have and for being on the show today and sharing a little piece of it with us.
Oh man, I mean, it's a real treat for me to have this relationship with you, Lauren, and to know each other for many years now, and to it's the third day we met. We went to Charlottesville, something like that.
Yeah. Part of the counter protest of clergy witnessing, pre-clergy at that point, seminarians witnessing to justice, witnessing to racial justice, and standing with the Charlottesville community, with the Black community, with people of color.
Yeah. And I'm thrilled at what you're doing, and and you are using your platform and your position of relative power in certain ways to spread the good news. And I mean, it's still hard for me to break out of that language, right? But to make this world a better place and to advocate for those who need advocating. I'll never forget being in Ramallah and meeting the priest at an Anglican church there, who now is the Archbishop of Jerusalem. And he said, don't pray for peace. Like, that's not going to happen. It's like, pray that we don't give up hope. Like, that's, and what you are doing is giving people a lot of hope right now. That
thank you,
somebody here in this place, in this time, is raising in front of everybody really, really important issues about real people who are suffering in real time.
Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome.
Until next time.
Bye, everybody.